It gets serious in the Pac-12 South. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we all love each and every day with the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the industry. Analysis from myself as well. Of course, you can get my Week 4 college football predictions, my weekly predictions, down in the description section below next to Voice of College Football Community. USC, Utah. Now, this is a Friday night game we can all lock in on, regardless of your team, your conference. If you love college football and want to know where this season is headed, this is the one to point to in the Pac-12 South, and certainly has been the last few years. We got Pete Garrison on the line from Fox Sports. You can also catch him on USC Blog Talk Radio. Pete, how you doing today?
Well, we're doing well. It's going to be a quick week here, a Friday game and everything. But what a huge game it is already in Week 4, Mark. I mean, you got, I think, the best team, without a doubt, in the Pac-12 Conference, the Utah Utes, coming in 3-0. Really, they've just breezed by their opponents so far. And this is probably going to be the tiebreaker in the conference, in the South, I should say, the Pac-12 South. I think these are the two strongest teams in the Pac-12 South. Arizona State's making a little bit of noise with their win in East Lansing last week. But I think these are the two strongest teams, and the question is going to be, is USC ready for this powerhouse Utah team?
Yeah, it's a team that's probably a 2.0 of what they've been most of the time in the past. They always bring a tremendous defensive front. They play hard-nosed football. They love to run the football, but they have had some backs that have been the equal of a Zach Moss, but not too many. He's about as good as it gets across the nation. Tyler Huntley fits their offense at quarterback just about as good as anyone could. He's not a great player, elite player, but he's extremely good. Hurt you with his legs. They try to protect him in regards to not too many passes downfield. The receiver core, again, not elite, but very capable, experienced. They're just a solid team up and down, and Kyle Whittingham certainly knows how to prepare his team for a big game.
Yeah, you got to give credit to Whittingham. You're right. The one thing he hasn't done yet, Mark, is win in Los Angeles, and a lot of USC fans keep bringing that point up. But I don't really like to go back into history and completely different rosters, because that's to me it's somewhat irrelevant. Of course, you got to talk about the school history, and it's fun to talk about that. But really, we're talking about two teams right now that are even very different. On the USC front, at least, USC is a very different team than they were last year, just even 10, 11 months ago. So this USC defense is going to have their hands full. Everyone talks about the Utah defense, but the Utah offense, you mentioned, is very efficient. And Zach Moss, I think, without a doubt, the best running back in the conference. He's averaging just under 7 yards a carry. He's got 4 touchdowns on the year. And the interesting thing about Moss is you can use him in a couple different ways. He can run on the edge. He likes to go one-on-one with defensive backs. The Utah offense actually likes to put him in those scenarios where he's in open space and he can work against the DBs, the corners, and try to juke them out and pick up extra yardage. He can also run inside the tackles, though. He can ground and pound. He's a strong guy, a big back, and he can run it right up the middle, right up your gut, and punch it in for a 2-3 yard carry if he needs in short yardage downs or in the red zone. He only has 2 catches on the year, though, which is interesting. So he's not exactly a threat out of the backfield. And that's something the USC offense loves to do with their running backs. They like to throw to Stephen Carr and Vavai Malapei with little screen pass, especially with their freshman quarterback, Keaton Slovis. They've been really using that play a lot, and it's been working a lot. So this Utah offense, you also mentioned Tyler Huntley. He's been extremely efficient this year. It's unbelievable, Mark. 0 picks, 0 sacks on the year. And he's thrown for 4 touchdowns. He has an 85.4 QBR, a 195 passer rating, completing 78% of his passes, and he's never attempted more than 19 passes in a game. So when he does throw, he's very efficient, doesn't throw picks yet. I mean, you have to look at Utah's opponents so far. It's been BYU, who's a good team. USC obviously just lost last week in overtime to the Cougars in Provo. But they've also faced the Iowa State Bengals and the Northern Arizona Huskies. Not 2 household names in college football. So you have to look a little bit at their opponents. Their schedule was much easier to open the season compared to, let's say, a USC or an Oregon. But you can't overlook this offense, even though we'll get into the defense a little bit more. But this offense with Tyler Huntley, he's really progressed. He's not, your typical pocket passing quarterback, but he can run as well. He's got some speed, got some wheels, and he's just been extremely efficient this year. So you can't really put him down if the guy's thrown no picks, hasn't been sacked, and has a 195 passer rating.
Yeah, they had the one true cupcake. Now, Northern Illinois is usually a upper tier MAC team. So they're a decent team that Utah beat by 11 points last year there, and came back and only had a 4-point lead in the fourth quarter before they put them away. It's interesting that through only 3 games, this rarely happens, that you got two teams facing off each other that have a common opponent that we can make some level of comparison. And they both played them on the road in Provo. Despite the final score of 30-12, Utah struggled during the first half. I watched almost the entire game, and they really had a rough time. Now, they made some game-changing plays on defense, a pick six. They made those kind of plays, but in terms of total yardage and the way the game was played, it was a pretty fair matchup. So Utah did not roll over BYU despite the final score. They wore them down. It was kind of a fourth quarter, let's impose our will at this point. Obviously, USC had its issues in a very intriguing game that went to overtime. So pointing to Keaton Slovis, and after the big high of the Stanford win, and then throwing 3 interceptions, some not his fault against BYU, what would you be his? How would you summarize his performance last week?
Well, yeah, it goes to show you that Stanford's defense is definitely having a down year. They're not the typical Stanford defense that we're used to. Went for 377 in that one, no picks, 3 touchdowns. Last week, 3 picks. And other than those 3 picks, which were honestly just true freshman mistakes, especially the one in overtime, he threw into double coverage, a tight window to another freshman receiver, Drake London, who's also actually a basketball player at USC. It was just an ill-advised throw, Mark. And, you know, sometimes with this USC team and a Slovis, it's like kind of like golf. You hit a drive, one hole right down the fairway, perfect. You're loving it. Next hole, you try to do the same swing and you shank one into the rough or hit it into the sand trap. And that's the part about USC they've really struggled is consistency. They can't hit it down the fairway every time. And Slovis, he's going to have some growing pains. I think he's going to be a future star. He's got a great head on his shoulders, extremely mature. Obviously, he's got the arm talent if you throw for almost 400 yards against a Stanford team, regardless of the roster. But he's going to make some mistakes, and USC is going to have some growing pains. And I just think last week, those were 3 freshman mistakes. And other than those three throws, he played pretty well. He had an opening drive touchdown. He made some sweet throws to Pittman in the end zone, and Eric Kromanoke, he made a perfect ball for a 70-yard play that led to a touchdown. But he's going to have some growing pains, and this is going to be probably his toughest opponent on the year in Utah. They've got an amazing defensive backcourt, Mark. They've got an impressive defensive line, too. That's going to be a real big challenge for USC to try to block those guys. And the Trojans are actually missing a key offensive lineman, Andrew Voorhees, who's going to be out a few weeks, actually. He's going to miss a few games. So it's going to be up to that O-line, which played fantastically against Stanford and played pretty well against BYU. But this is going to be a big test for USC against this defense when you got guys that are, all Americans really, and future NFL players like a Jalen Johnson, who one scout said is the best corner in the conference. We always talk about Paulson Adebo on Stanford, but the scout said that Jalen Johnson's actually even better than Paulson Adebo. And then you got Julian Blackman in the backfield too. So those are their top 2 defensive backs, but the real matchup's going to be, what is USC going to do with their number 3 and 4 receivers, the guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Velus Jones Jr.? What are they going to do against the number 3 and 4 Utah defensive backs? Are they going to be able to win that battle? Because we know Pittman's going to go up against guys like Johnson and Blackman and Tyler Vaughns, who's having a fantastic year leading the Pac-12 in receptions. But are they going to be able to beat the other players on this USC Ute defense?
Yeah, and as usual, in John Penasini and Lecky Fotu, Utah's got a couple of 330-pound guys right anchoring the middle of the line, which, of course, USC is going to have to deal with as well. And it's kind of this dichotomy when I look at this matchup, because if you look at the talent on the roster as first indicated by the recruiting rankings, it's USC's favor. It's not even close. Bringing in top 10 to 15 classes every year versus Utah bringing in their kind of the Pac-12 version of Wisconsin, where they don't care what their recruiting ranking is. They're going to go out there and get their 9 or 10 wins regardless, because they develop players and they've got a veteran bunch. So the sheer talent would speak to USC, but I go through position by position matchup, and I don't see hardly anywhere except the great matchup that you just outlined of USC's star wide receiver core going up against an extremely strong secondary is where USC might have an advantage. Otherwise, it's just difficult to find one.
Yeah, you're right. In the USC wide receiver core, week in, week out, should be having an advantage and should be posing a problem to their opposing defenses. I think one area you can also look is kind of the USC three-headed monster, you could say it's turning into at running back. It hasn't quite reached that limit yet, but Vavai Malapaya has been extremely efficient this year. He can catch passes, like I mentioned earlier, out of the backfield. He's running for around 5 yards a carry. Stephen Carr, we know, has all the talent in the world, a little bit of a smaller back, but very shifty. He pretty much makes a guy miss every time he touches the ball. And then Marquise Stepp is a guy that's really been talked about. My guys over at USC Scoop, Scott Schrader and those guys, and then even Yogi Roth was talking about it with me. Stepp is just a beast. He's 240 pounds. He's only a sophomore. He's only had 12 carries on the year mark, but he's picked up 86 yards on those 12. He's averaging over 7 yards a carry. And he got some touches in that BYU game. When he gets momentum, he's tough. He's a tough guy to stop because he just barrels through. So we were talking about this week, how many carries should Stepp get? And I think it'd be nice if he could get around 8, 9, 10 carries. And you can really mix and match these backs for USC. But you're right, the receiving core is the true strength. But I think these running backs are going to have to come up big for the Trojans.
There's a few things that maybe USC can count on. Again, I'm like you. I don't like to rely on the past, especially when we're talking history, because there's no comparison between the football histories of the two schools. But when you're talking recent times, yeah, Utah, very impressive in what Kyle Whittingham has built and what they are. But the one thing that they don't do is they just, because of their style of football, they don't blow anybody away unless they just have a severe talent mismatch. But when they play somebody in the same talent category, they just play a style of football that I'm going to be a bit surprised if there's any team that's outside of a 10-point margin in the fourth quarter. So USC is going to most likely hang around, even if they're getting beat up a little bit, even if they're getting outmanned in certain it's probably going to be a 24-17, 24-21 game in the fourth quarter, and USC is going to be able to make some plays or have that opportunity to pull the game out.
I like your prediction there, Mark, because I have Utah beating USC 27-24, so a close game, somewhat low scoring, and Utah's got the better team on paper. They've executed. Yes, USC probably has the higher star recruits and everything, but I mean, come on, Keaton Slovis was a 3-star that no one wanted to recruit, and he's looking like a pretty good quarterback at 18 years old. So I think a big key is going to be the turnover battle. This year, I already mentioned Tyler Huntley has yet to get sacked or throw an interception. USC on the defensive side, they've only picked off 2 passes all season, and they've only forced 1 fumble. So they need to win that turnover battle if they want any chance in this, because they've, over the past year and a half, been prone to turnovers, throwing picks, making freshman mistakes with it, either JT Daniels or Keaton Slovis. So the turnover battle is going to be key, and this USC defense is going to have to be strong. Christian Rector's coming back, thankfully. He missed last week's game, the senior captain who lines up on the defensive end, kind of that predator linebacker position that we used to see Porter Gustin play for the Trojans. He's on one end, Drake Jackson's on the other, and Drake Jackson, number 99, if you're watching the game tomorrow night, which you should be. It's on Fox Sports 1, nationally televised. Drake Jackson's fun to watch. And I was talking to Clancy Pendergast, the USC defensive coordinator, just a couple days ago at practice, and he said this guy's just beyond his years. He came in, yes, he has the physical attributes, but the skill and the scheme that he knows, the mental part of the game, he's just miles ahead of a normal freshman. So with Rector back, that should be big because USC sorely missed him last week.
Pete Garrison joining us on a regular basis from Fox Sports. You can catch him also on Blog Talk Radio, talking USC football. Joins us on a regular basis to get us set for the USC game on the weekend. And this may make or break the season. Of course, this, even if they win this, they got a whole lot of work to do. But when you talk about the Pac-12 South, last year and this year, it appears to start and end with Utah. And if you can knock them off head-to-head, then considering there's a win in the bank already for USC in conference play, they'd be off to a great, great start. Pete, we appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, enjoy anytime, Mark. Talk to you next week.